Who is most in control of your life, God or you?
I would say me right now.
I like to say myself.
Me. Absolutely me.
I like that idea of being in control.
I think I'm most in control of my own life. It is definitely what he wants, not what I want.
You do what you believe God wants you to do.
I am, just because God kind of just watches over you and doesn't really try and control your life.
I think God, because I can't do anything without him. I mean, I've been without him before and it just didn't go well.
God controls my life, but I learn from my decisions.
I definitely feel like I'm in control of what I do.
I live for me through him.
I guess you can say God could influence my choices and such, but I'd say overall I'm in the most control of my life.
Think about the person in your life you're closest to.
A parent, a friend. Chances are you're really close to someone and you trust them a lot.
You let them get to know your hopes and fears.
You trust that they have your best interests at heart.
You ask for their help in making your decisions.
What about God? Do you ask him for help with your decisions?
As Christians, we believe that God knows us intimately and has an awesome plan to make us the best people we can be.
God has also given us free will. We can choose whether or not we wish to accept his plan.
God in control. That's what we'll be talking about today. Hi everyone, I'm Justin.
And I'm Carolee.
And this is Real Faith TV.
Most of the teens on the street saw themselves as being solely in control,
while others acknowledge God's divine role in shaping their lives.
We'll talk with them more in a few minutes as well as meet our studio guests.
But first, let's meet our spotlight guest, Javier Bustamante.
Javier is the director of the Youth and Young Adult Ministry in the Diocese of Metuchen.
Next, he will share with us who he thinks is in control.
Let's hear him now.
God is in control of my life, although sometimes I want to take that control back. But in the end, you have to surrender to the fact that God is always in control, no matter which way you want to go. Different moments in my life have kind of led me to have this understanding, this perspective. I've resisted a lot of things that God has tried to do in my life. I think that God is in control of my life because no matter what I do, there are always great things that happen to me. They're always good things, but they're great things. Things that help me grow. They're things that help me become a better person. Sometimes they're painful, sometimes they're very joyful. To me, that's one of the indications that God is in control of my life. Because if I was in control of my life, to be honest, my life would probably be very empty, very self-centered, very selfish. Life is filled with great opportunities, brilliantly disguised as impossible situations. And if we trust God, he'll carry us through that, and we'll be able to see those opportunities for what they are, rather than obstacles. We'll begin to see them as opportunity for greatness.
Personally, I've never resisted God because he did mention that he had some struggle with that, but I've learned to just go with the flow. I don't think I've ever had a moment where I was like, okay, I need to let God have control. I've always kind of just let him take the wheel and just let it be what it is.
Yeah, sometimes life can get so hectic that I'm like, please God, take control. I need help. So let's see what our studio guests have to say.
Okay, they are Moni,
Ricky,
Vanessa,
Allie,
Anthony,
and John. So is God in control of your lives?
And if he is, how do you know?
I get these feelings every now and again where I just have to do something. And I know it's God telling me what to do. And I don't question why. I don't ever question why I have to do it. I just do it. And it always turns out right for me. So that's how I know God is in control of my life.
I always know God's in control of my life. It's definitely apparent. And for an example, when I was younger, I had a very bad experience. And God, instead of letting me loathe my own self-hatred and my own internal destruction, he put the right people in my path to give me the right tools so that my past wouldn't determine my future.
It's a definite that God's in control of my life. This show would be a great example, just how God led me to this show, and just I made friends with all of you guys, and just, we're evangelizing the word, so he's definitely guiding me in a direction towards serving him and, meeting new people and just living out the faith.
Yeah, I would definitely say that God's in control of my life, but I sometimes forget that he is, and sometimes it takes something like a traumatic event or maybe a death in the family or something where you realize that something's really overwhelming and you can't bear that type of pressure or pain alone. So you ask him for help, and that's when you know he's there.
God has carefully designed us and calls us to be the best version of ourselves.
He tells us this in the book of Jeremiah, chapter 29. For I know well the plans I have in mind for you.
Plans for your welfare, not for your woe, so as to give you a future of hope.
So, do we trust the plans that God has for us?
Do we trust him enough to let him sit in the driver's seat of our lives?
Have you made the effort to turn your life over to God?
That's what we ask the teens on the street.
Let's check it out.
Have you consciously given your life over to God?
I'm trying to day by day.
No, but I do consider it because a bunch of my friends are religious, and I definitely want to believe in it.
I think that I want to be in control of my life and make my own decisions and not really rely so much on God.
I kinda would, but not definitely.
To be honest, I haven't gave my life over to God yet. I always talk about it, but there's a lot of things I have to do and think about first before I give my life to him.
Giving God control of our lives is scary. Definitely don't know what to do sometimes. It involves a lot of prayer. The Holy Spirit is involved. And overall, it's definitely just a complete sacrifice to any goals or ambitions I had before and turning towards God's goals and ambitions for me.
I was getting into bad things, just doing wrong in and out of jail. And as soon as I started praying and talking to God, he hasn't really talked back, but he's giving me signs to bring me down the right path.
Freshman year of high school, or of college, I should say. And while I was there, I kind of realized who I was living for, and that was myself, and how I was just dissatisfied with that. And I got involved with a church and a campus ministry. I finally said yes to Jesus, yes to taking control of my life.
I was going through some really hard times with the party scene and everything, and it just wasn't what I wanted life to be. And I knew there was more, so I kind of went searching a little. I just decided that I wanted to live with Christ, so I gave him my heart. And from I wouldn't say it's been easy since then, but it's been much better, and I know that the struggles I have are worthwhile struggles instead of before when I wasn't living for anything.
What makes it difficult for you guys to let God be fully in control of your lives?
And for those of you who have been successful, how do you do it?
You kind of have to go against the current to do what God wants you to, and then it's not something everyone is doing, so it's not the norm, and so you have to find your own way.
I agree, especially in today with social networking and Twitter. It's hard to voice your opinion on something that isn't related to materialistic things. It's hard to be I'm going to church this Sunday, and so it's hard for you to go to church and serve God the way you want him to, and for you to make those decisions, because then you may unfriend people, but then in the long term, those friends aren't worth it anyway.
I've always wanted to have control of my life because of the many things that just didn't go right, and I just always thought that God was just doing this to me when in reality he's not. And it's just, you need to let go of the reins at one point in your life and know that the outcome of God's plan for you won't be as bad as you think.
It's hard for people to let God completely in control of their life, to let him in, even in the smallest glimpse, because you can't really physically see him, you can't physically hear him, so it's kind of hard for some people.
Think of Christian singers or songwriters who have used their gifts of music to spread the gospel throughout the world.
Or Catholic athletes who defend their faith to prove that it's possible to be famous and to still love God.
Or maybe the person who isn't famous but just loves helping people and making everyone's day better.
They're all able to do that by using the gifts God has given them.
We can only do those great things when we are following what he wants and being who he has created us to be.
Our spotlight guest, Javier, was born in Peru and moved to the United States to live with his godfather,
leaving family and friends behind when he was just 12 years old.
Although he did make good friends and was happy in the U.S., he felt something was missing.
He felt emptiness. That all began to change, though, when a friend invited him to go to Mass.
Javier became more active in his parish and started to recognize God's presence in his life.
Next, Javier shares with us how following God's will for his life has led him into directions he never thought possible.
And how the decisions he's made have always been in consultation with God.
I was a Catholic. I was raised a Catholic, and I was a cultural Catholic, as I call it. That's how I grew up in Peru. It was part of our culture. When I lived in Peru, I went to Mass because it was my homework. And when I came to the States, somebody invited me to Mass, and it was no longer my homework. It was something I could choose to do. And that was, I think, was the first step in this dance with God. Eventually, as I grew, I started, I became an altar server. I started making decisions as to what kind of friends I was going to have in my life. I eventually got involved with youth ministry, and that changed my life as well. When I decided to go to school, that was another moment that kind of God took control and led me into the best school that for me at that moment in my life. In every little step of my life, I've seen that, decisions that I've made in consultation with God have been the right decisions. All those decisions I've made because I was at peace. And I could experience that peace that God was giving me just by saying, hey, you lead me where you want me to go. But that takes years, it doesn't happen overnight. I know some people have this idea that all of a sudden you turn your life over to God and everything's gonna, it's gonna be blissful, but it doesn't happen that way. It's a journey, it's an ongoing journey.
God might show us what He wants for us, but then we have to do something about it.
Maybe God has created us with a great talent for music and calls us to use it.
But we need to jump into that wholeheartedly and put forth the work and effort so we can be the best we can be.
Sometimes saying yes is hard. God might be calling us somewhere that we're not sure we want to go.
Let's go back to the teens on the street where we asked them to share any stories where either they or someone they knew gave their life over to God.
When my friend was 5 years old, her mom passed away, and she was kind of upset with God, and she kind of turned away for a while. But then she came to my school, and it's a Catholic high school, and she let God back into her life, and she's really happy now.
2 years ago, I was in jail. I didn't have nothing to live for, and now I got a full-time job. I make good money. I got my license, a car, all that, and I'm doing good. So as soon as I gave my life over to God, everything changed for the better.
Before it was, I was successful in school or successful in sports or, whatever that may be, but I always pointed back to myself and said, look how good I am. But after accepting Jesus and changing and giving up control to God, it was a total difference, God got all the glory, said it's all for Him. I'm doing it because He's called me to do it.
I used to party a lot, and that went involved with drinking, smoking, and a lot of sexual impurities. So then when I finally came to Christ, it was much easier to resist those kinds of things because I knew that wasn't what was pleasing to God, and God didn't want me to live that way because it just it hurt me who I was when I did those things.
I know a girl that was kind of partied a lot and didn't get good grades, and then one day went to church and completely turned her life around and is now in the honor society, and I guess you can say a role model.
That last story, what the boy was saying, how he met this one girl who was getting bad grades and always partying, and then eventually she turned her life around. I have several stories of that. I have a couple family members who actually were just not academic, and they were not hanging with the good crowd, but eventually they found church, they found family, and everything just started coming together. And I think it's really cool. It's a great thing to see, and I hope that happens with a lot of people today.
Well, yeah, I also agree that Mass can be really helpful because I know sometimes I can wake up in the morning, my dad will wake me up for church on Sundays, and I'll be like, ooh, I'm not into going right now. But then I'll be like, no, it's the right thing to do. And then so God will push me to do this, and then it'll just change my outlook on the rest of the day. And it really helps me get through the week.
I think one of the most beautiful things about God is that He never forces us to do anything. He'll never pressure us into letting Him be in control. We have to choose that for us. And I know especially in my life, one of the things that I always felt pressure about was grades and getting the good grades. And one day, my dad was seeing how stressed out I was becoming over my grades, and he said to me, God gave you those gifts of, intelligence, and He let you be able to make these good grades. Don't worry about it. Just put it in His hands. If you study, that's all you can do. Don't stress out about it more than that. And once he told me that, I just stopped worrying about it, and it's worked out pretty good for me. I've gotten, decent grades.
Yeah, for me, a saint that emblems giving your life to God is St. Thomas Becket. He was the opposite of a holy man. He would favor, and this was in the time of King Henry. He would favor King Henry's will over the will of the Pope, and then he was made archbishop by the king to kind of spy on the Pope and the Church, and he really started believing in all the precepts of the church, and he became completely loyal to the church and turned away from all the secular influences in life. So that's someone who really, to me, gave their life to God.
After completing 2 years of community college, Javier received a private scholarship to attend Georgetown University.
But shortly after, the floor dropped from underneath him.
Even though Javier had been in the United States for 19 years, he wasn't documented.
3 days after receiving the scholarship, he was picked up by immigration authorities and put in jail.
Facing deportation back to Peru, it looked like his dreams were coming to an end.
Next, let's find out about the peace that God gave to Javier during this difficult time in his life.
I got this scholarship in March, and about 3 days later, I was detained by the Immigration Border Patrol. I was jailed there, and I was put under removal proceedings, which means that I could be deported and sent back to Peru. For me, it was like, here's my dream of going to school, and all of a sudden, I'm in this situation where I don't know what's going to happen to me. I looked out this window, and I could see the highway, and there was somebody had carved on the window the phrase, "Jesus saves." And to me, it was very ironic because here I am jailed with my dreams kind of apparently coming to an end. And here was this phrase that said, "Jesus saved." And so I started talking to God. I started crying, and I started telling him how I felt. I remember that a peace came over me. It's something that I haven't experienced again. But it was just this peace, this inner confidence that God wanted me there at that moment. And I didn't know what it was about. I didn't know what he wanted me to do. And eventually, during my week, I actually met a young man who was in jail. He had a daughter and a family. He'd actually been cheated by his relatives out of some money. And so in order to get rid of him, they reported him to immigration, and so they were gonna deport him. When I was leaving jail, this gentleman stayed there, and one of the things he told me when I was leaving, he said, "I know that God brought you here so that I could once again speak to him. Because through our friendship, my friendship with him, he was able to go back to prayer and to seek God as his strength." I didn't know it at the time. There was a peace that overcame, that just kind of surrounded me. And at the end of the day, it was one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. It was life-changing.
God never wants something for us that we shouldn't want for ourselves.
Maybe we don't want it right now, but that probably means that we don't want the right things.
Really, saying yes to God opens doors to things we could have never imagined.
Next, we asked the teens on the street what saying yes to God looks like.
And what it means to let him take control.
When we give God control of our lives, we just change inside and outside. People see a different person. Even if you're not like evangelizing on the streets, people see a different person inside. The way you act to people, you treat them with love, compassion. The way you treat people is kind of everything. They see Jesus through you.
When we give God control of our lives, I think it looks like true happiness.
He knows what's good for us, so he's only going to do the best for us.
It's good for people to have something to turn to, something good in their life, so they have something to live by.
But you can have faith that no matter what happens, everything will be okay.
Motivation, really.
It overall giving me just a sense of security.
It just gives you assurance that there's something out there.
Eternal life, for sure. A more joyful life, a more purpose-driven life, a life that's characterized by happiness and fulfillment.
Your friendships and people you know are much purer if you put God at the center. So it's just a lot better for all your relationships and just who you are.
Pretty much just being a stronger person. Like, you just learn a lot more about yourself and your faith, and you learn just how to deal with things and where your final destination is going to be, because it's all in God's hands.
If you give your life to God, then you're overall going to be happier in life.
Man, you get to go to heaven. The benefits right there. That's enough right there, You get to go to heaven, so that's great.
So what does saying yes to God look like to you?
And how do we figure out his will?
My sister lives in New York City, and on her way to work, she would pass this homeless man. And she had the definite choice to walk by him and not even acknowledge his existence. But instead, she built a relationship with him, and she would go to the nearest store, and she would buy him a sandwich and a coffee every morning. And I think that was saying yes to God, because she didn't have to do that, but she felt in her heart that it would be the right thing to do.
2 years ago, I went on this trip to West Virginia, to the Appalachian Mountains, to like help rebuild houses and everything. And I just think that's saying yes to God, because you know, you're helping people. I was helping build houses for these people who are incredibly poor, and like I'm going again in a week, and I'm so excited. Like I can't wait.
Yeah, I work for hospice. I care for people who are dying, and even though you're around death, it's almost refreshing spiritually because you're serving God. It's almost life-giving in a sense. It helps you become closer to the Lord.
One of our past Spotlight guests was actually my Uncle Mike in one of our episodes. And growing up, he had a ton of problems with alcohol and drugs, but now through him, I see a direction. He's changed, that he has a way to God, and he knows what he's doing, and he's genuinely happy. And it's just so easy to see what he's trying to get closer to God, and he's studying in theology, and it's just amazing.
It's what we desire and what makes us feel most happy and at peace.
This doesn't mean the fleeting happiness that comes from the worldly things.
God has placed good desires in our heart, and if we feel drawn to a particular thing,
a certain friendship, a certain act of service, a certain college, a certain dating relationship, we can trust that it's there for a reason.
Finally, our Spotlight guest Javier discusses how God in control means putting absolute trust in him,
and how he relates this control to a dance with God.
Faith is not believe in God, but rather faith is believing God. So the next logical thing is, do you trust God? And to me, that's the essence of, of what it means to turn over your life to God. If you trust God, then you know He's going to do what's best for you. He says, my yoke is easy and my burden light. He's basically telling us that we have to come to Him with everything that we carry. I took some dance lessons a couple years ago with my wife, and one of the things that I learned in dancing is that the man is in control. And so I think when I was leading, we were doing fine. But there were moments in there where, she would like to take control of, like there was a move or something that I wanted to do and she would be resistant. And so it would come out very awkward. And I think that's how turning over your life to God and letting Him be in control is. He's the expert. He knows how to dance. And the good thing is that He'll never lead us in any direction that will make us look bad. If we're good partners in that dance, the dance will look beautiful and we'll win the contest of life. One of the things that I would tell young people, be patient with yourself. As you're trusting God, as you're turning your life over to God, there are different things that are going to happen in your life. You're going to be like, wait, this is part of the relationship? How is this? You're going to doubt God. You're going to be angry at God. And those are all good things. Those are things that He wants to receive from you so that He can help you through all of that. I'm actually expecting the arrival of my first child. It's a great leap of trust for me in trusting God that He's going to make me a good father. So it never ends. It never ends. It's like every morning you have to wake up and say, okay, God, you're in control today. Some days are easier than others. Trust is a hard thing to do, because a lot of people let us down. But the one person that won't let us down is Jesus Christ. And so, just learn to trust Him and learn to allow Him to lead you in the dance.
My friend is a dancer, and she does many rigorous hours of dancing exercises, and whenever she comes over to my house, she's always dancing. Like, she never takes a break. She never eats, she never drinks. I'm like, what is wrong with you? But then I realized that when you go to say yes to God, it takes practice, and that every opportunity you get to say yes to God, you should take it, because it's like taking the ride on a roller coaster. It's just an amazing experience, and you want to experience it.
I think the bottom line is that God always wants us to be happy. So when we say yes to Him, He's going to lead us down a path that shows off our gifts and our talents and really lets us shine. And in turn, we're going to look good for Him and show Him off as, come follow God, because it makes us happy and it's the right thing to do.
What popped in my head when he was talking was a person that represents what he was saying, who gave full acceptance and giving themselves to God. And she's from the Bible, it's Jesus' mom, Mary. She, when the Archangel Gabriel came to her and said, you will have God's child, she didn't bat an eye at it. She said, yeah. She was all for it, and she gave full acceptance and herself to God from day one. And to me, she's a perfect example of a person that said yes to God.
I think a really crucial example of saying yes to God is when Jesus is in the Garden of Gethsemane and he says, Father, if it's all possible, let this cup be passed from me, but let it be your will that's done, not mine. And that's just I think the best way, the best example of saying yes to God, just his acceptance of God's will for him to give his life for the salvation of man.
I like at the end what Javier said, how he was like, Jesus will never let us down. You know, that's true. Like, giving yourself up to God, yeah, like you said, it takes a lot of practice, but in the end, practice makes perfect. And when we finally get it right, Jesus won't let us down.
Trusting God begins with frequent and honest prayer.
Ask God to reveal his plans for you, and he will.
Talk to God about what you want or don't want.
Be open about what you feel. This could help you to figure out that there's something deeper that you need to work on.
The more we receive the Eucharist and go to confession, the more we receive graces that make it easier to follow God's will.
The more we come to God, the more he keeps away the devil and helps us to see what he wants for us.
How are you letting God in control of your life?
We'd love to hear from you.
Contact us at realfaithtv.com.
Or share your thoughts with us on Twitter.
And we'll leave you today with this thought.
St. Catherine of Siena once said, "If you are what you should be, you will set the world ablaze."
We become what we should be by letting God show us how, and then by responding to his call.
So pray for guidance and give it up to God.
All we need to do is say yes.
And let Jesus take the wheel.
Thanks for watching.
We'll see you next time on
Real Faith TV. God bless.